good steward of security, the good responsible defender, will recognize those who are doing nothing but disruption. And just like that parable that Jesus told of in the 22nd, I'm pretty sure it's 22nd chapter of Matthew, said they'll be bound up and thrown out, hands and feet. And that may sound harsh to some people, but listen, we have an attack going on in this country against morality. There is right and wrong. There is a God and there's Satan, and they are enemies.
Yeah.
And Satan is like a roaring lion seeking those he may devour. And we cannot ignore this this campaign against righteousness in our country. We can no longer ignore the fact that we're letting sin come in and be justified. A friend of mine said some years ago, sin held in the dark corners, and now it's right out in the open. It's in the hallway of our school and the nation.
But the challenge remains that, you know, there may be those that don't share our faith. Maybe they may even be, you know, strongly opposed to it. But that's different than those that would do violence and would do destruction. And, you know, like the Bethel AME in Charleston, if I remember the story correctly, he entered the church and, you know, I think they recognized something was off, but they welcomed him in to do Bible study with them, hoping that would be the right thing to do. And, and if I remember it correctly, he did for a time sit with them until whatever set him off. And so it came out of nowhere for them. You know, they thought they were doing the right thing. And it just remains a challenge. You know, it's that risk assessment that, you know, doesn't come naturally to everybody. And so, you know, that's where the security part comes in, is because your average church attendee or pastor is thinking in a very different mindset than a security officer or public safety officer or whatever it's called. The point of view that they would have is just different.
You know, you touched on one of the most tragic of all of them out there. It wasn't Bethel, it was Mother Emanuel AME.
Mother Emanuel, excuse me.
And you know, the anger that he had, and he was there very deliberately to kill people. He had come for that one reason and one reason only. And he did sit there for over 50 minutes without ever saying a word.
Right.
And towards the end of it is when he jumped up and just started just ruthlessly killing people.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that came out of that was a young man by the name of Tawanza Sanders. And Tawanza was the one who stopped him, stood in between him. He'd just seen what that 45 ACP did to his pastor's head, to other people around the table. As Tawanza saw him going around the table and shooting people, and of course you can imagine people are jumping up and starting to run, and chaos is taking over. But Tawanza stood between that barrel of that gun and his 87-year-old Aunt Susie Jackson.
Right.
And he pleaded with that guy to stop.
Right. And
he said, "Sir, why are you doing this?" And that's when the idiot said all the stupid things he did about black people. And I've never repeated them. I won't. They're not worthy of repeating because they came from the mouth of an idiot. And then Tawanza himself was shot, dropped to the floor, and then he shot his 87-year-old aunt, Susie Jackson.
Yeah.
And as Tawanza lay dying, he was with his dying breath, stroking the hands of his Aunt Susie, telling her it'd be okay. And the reason we know this is because Tawanza's own mother was laying on the floor, Felicia Sanders, laying on one of her grandchildren to protect that grandchild, and watched all this unfold in front of her eyes. And she testified of all this in the trial. And to me, Tawanza Sanders is one of those people I want to meet when I get to heaven, because he had protection in his heart. He, like so many of these people, had no military background. He had no law enforcement background, but he recognized pure evil when he saw it. And he was willing to put himself between the violence of a 45 caliber gun and another innocent victim and try to stop that. We need that type of people in every church, every small church, every large church. Listen, there's only a dozen people in that after church Bible study that night. They'd already had their main Bible study, their main Wednesday evening service, and this was a subgroup of the most dedicated people who were meeting on the lower level, on the ground level, the first floor.
Right.
When he came in and killed them. So these were people who absolutely represented the heart of Christ. I've walked that church. I've met some of their people. They're some of the most beautiful people on the face of the earth. We disagree on some political issues, and that's okay. And that gets back to what you said a while ago, that you put people in the same room, they're going to have some disagreements. But we are united in the fact that we need to protect the innocent.
Yeah, that's the thing is, you know, people can disagree, you know, that's the beautiful part of our country, you know, but, you know, we all have to unite around the value of human life. And, you know, the people that would perpetrate these types of things don't share that value for human life, obviously, you know, for whatever motivation or reason. Yeah, there's so many I mean, one of the statistics that jumps out at me, which is, you know, it goes directly to this, you know, targeted hate, is that, you know, people of the Jewish faith represent like 3% of our population, but hate crimes, you know, everything from vandalism up to, you know, personal violence, is over 50% of the religious targeted crimes, you know. So, you know, whatever the motivation, you know, it doesn't matter. It's a matter of knowing that wherever there are people of faith and belief and, you know, ethnicity and color and what have you, anything that is different than the perpetrator, he could find, you know, a reason in his distorted mind to do violence. And unfortunately, that means that all of us need to be prepared for that.
You know, you're right, and I don't disagree with that. I absolutely agree with that. But here's one of the things in my study that I've tracked through the years. When you look at just deadly force incidents, forget hate crime, because as I've said, that's an agenda-driven, a legislative agenda-driven thing to port more finances and more awareness towards specific people groups. When you take the word hate crime out of it, and you just look at deadly force incidents, as far as people who have been killed or threatened at a faith-based organization, the Jewish population is 1.2% of those. 1.2%. So the violence in people's heart is what we need to be looking at, not hate crime legislation. That's taking our eye off the ball. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, there is violence in man's heart, and that pretty much follows the population. I mean, the biggest churches that have the most deadly force incident are Baptist and Catholic. Well, those are the two biggest churches in America. No denomination is exempt, including the Buddhist, because of this violence that's in man's heart.